Hello and welcome to All Hands on Tech, where today's leaders talk tomorrow's technology. I'm Jeremy Morgan. I'm excited about today's episode. Today I get to talk with Xavier Morera from sunny Costa Rica, while I'm sitting in rainy Portland, Oregon. But we talk about working from home, cloud search, computer vision, and how he uses those things both professionally and personally. Xavier's had a long career working with search and data, and he's written 22 courses for Pluralsight covering everything from JSON.net to computer vision. So let's welcome Xavier Morera. So how are you doing today, Xavier?
All good. It's great. How are you doing, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. As everyone can see, we are working remotely from our home.
Everyone else?
Yeah. Like everyone else.
Yeah.
So is that a big change for you, or did you work remotely before?
So I've been working remotely for quite a while. The thing is, I live in Costa Rica, but for the last 19 years, which has been my entire professional career, I've always worked for American or European companies. So even though I live like in vacation heaven, all of my projects are in the U.S. So I've been basically remote all the time. I've actually never worked for a Costa Rican company in a Costa Rican project. It's always partly owned American or European companies with projects over there. So for me, it's normal. Just that before, I have a very small office right now. That's where I have like my recording studio, the whisper room, and all of my equipment. I don't go to it anymore, so I'm working from home. So the only difference is that I have kids and a dog jumping all over the place. For me, I've been trained for this for a while. So, yeah. So I'm in the same boat. I work remotely anyway, but generally my family isn't here during the day. That's the only difference. But thankfully, have a 2-story house, so mostly they stay upstairs. But that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges right now with people working remotely. Isn't so much the working remotely part; it's just working remotely with a lot of distractions and with a lot of changes and going from an office. I know there are tons of people out there that have never worked remotely ever, and all of a sudden they've gone from 10, 20 years in an office to their home. So it's quite the adjustment.
It's 0 to 60 like in 1 second, like one day. Yeah. And the kids, that's something that a lot of people are really struggling with because the kids are now at home. We have a private tutor for the kids. I don't really can't afford it. I just married her. So I happen to marry a preschool teacher. So it's really good because she's on top of everything. I mean, I see her, she's printing stuff. She has the kids. She has a schedule. She believes it's important for the kids to keep a schedule, like they go to bed at the same time every night. They wake up at a similar time. They have their free time, their technology time, and then all of the topics that they're supposed to be learning at school. So that's good because kids need that structure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's really important. I don't know about you, but my kids are teenagers. And so at first they're like, yeah, vacation time. And both of us were like, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to be sleeping in until 10 o'clock and, pretending like this is a really long spring break. You've got to get that structure in place. So I'm sure having a wife that's a teacher helps a lot.
Yeah. And mine are 6 and 8. So they have a ton of energy. I mean, my wife is struggling every day. I think struggling, but she's doing a very good job of trying to find something different to do for them. So she has like these activities and our house is pretty small, but still, I mean, she went to the garage and drew with some crayons or something in the garage. It's like a circuit and they have to run over. They can't go, out into the streets, but they do that. We bought an inflatable pool. It was like $20, and we just put some water in it. They just let them play. They're using the VR, the Oculus Quest, the Nintendo Switch, the Wii, of course, limited. They have 30 minutes of technology in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. So no more than that because it's not like a game. So but that's the thing. I mean, we're surviving. We're doing a good job here.
Now, is it a mandatory lockdown where you're at, or is it just voluntary?
So at night, yes. There's like a $40 fine, which people are ignoring. There are like 600 people were stopped like in the first night and something similar the second night. Now they're going to start raising the fines, and I mean, it's not going to. You're supposed to be at your home unless it's essential. But, there's still some pictures of people going, on vacation. They're like I'm getting paid, I have to be at home. And some people can't work remotely. I have some people that work for me for a support center that I have, a technology thing. And one of them is like, dude, do you have like an extra laptop? Because my wife was told that if she gets a laptop of her own, she can work from home. But if she doesn't, she has to go into the office. And we don't want her to go there because we have kids and all that. So I gave the guy an extra laptop. But not all companies are prepared for people to go remote. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the challenges that you face working remotely from where you are? Are there challenges with time zones, internet connections, anything like that?
No, internet's pretty expensive here compared to other places, but you can get good business class internet connection. So I don't have that as an issue. In terms of time zone, actually, it's really good because I'm in the middle. So I'm like an hour or two behind the East Coast and then an hour ahead or behind the West Coast. So I'm just right in the middle. So for me, that's really good because I can cover, projects on both ends. It doesn't really matter. And also in terms of, all of my business in the U.S., so I have to travel all the time. But, getting to Miami, it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Going to New York is 4 hours. It's a straight, there's a direct flight. I could go to all Texas and, in California. California's a little bit longer. It's like 5 hours, but still it's a direct flight. So I can go pretty much everywhere at a reasonable amount of time.
Nice. So that's not too bad. So what kind of projects are you working on right now, if you can tell us?
So I'm right now updating a course on JSON.NET for Pluralsight. It's basically a new iteration. It has .NET Core and some of the new stuff. And I just finished, I'm finishing also helping Cloudera, the big data company, with some materials that they had around public cloud fundamentals. And this product that they have, it's called Cloudera Data Platform, which is basically just something. It's just a platform that runs in the cloud where you can run everything, from Hive, Spark, machine learning, pretty much has everything. So.
Oh, nice. So how did you get into big data?
So like from 2000 to 2010, I was all in the Microsoft ecosystem. I used to be a VDash, that's a vendor for Microsoft for like 7 or 8 years. I lived in Seattle, Bellevue, and Redmond for small periods of time because I was working in corp over there. And it was all SharePoint. I was doing internal work for InfoSec and Microsoft Consulting Services and other departments. And then one day I got a call from a friend. It's like, dude, we're working on this project that has a lot of SharePoint. Can you help us? I was like, okay. It was of our company called Search Technologies. And I went with them and they were doing the search. They were doing a platform for patent search. They were indexing and searching all 100 million patents in the world for this company called CP Global. It was a ton of data. And but they were exposing it through a SharePoint API. At the time, I think it was like the biggest in terms of data application done over a SharePoint platform. So I even had to present on the Microsoft SharePoint conference in Las Vegas, like in 2010 or something. I had to present the application. And so I was working on the SharePoint side. But after that project was done, these guys were working with all types of search frameworks. So they were like the experts in search. They were not committed to a single company. They worked with Google. They worked with Microsoft. They worked with LucidWorks. They worked with pretty much everybody. So that's when I got involved with Solar. That's one of the open source, most used open source search engines in the world right now. And then I got my start on that. I started working in Solar for quite a while. And then one day, one of the guys, the CEO of the company, came to me and said, his name was Cameron Khan. He says, hey, have you ever heard about Mike Olson and this company Cloudera? I'm like, nope, have no idea who they are. And he said, listen to these people. They really know what they're doing. And this happened because Search Technologies was helping Cloudera build an application for the Seattle Children's Hospital. They were using big data and search to try to look over DNA strands and identify like malformations or stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So and then I decided, hey, these people at Cloudera, they really know what they're doing. So I would like to start building courses on that. At the time, I was doing some course. I just finished my Solar course in Pluralsight. I was like, I'm going to do a Cloudera one. And I did like 5 of them. And one day, one of the VPs of Pluralsight calls me and says, hey, there's this company there's this friend of mine who needs some help on something. I'm like, I'm really busy on this thing. And it was like, dude, you need to talk to him. And turn out he was like the head of education at Cloudera, and they needed something. And I just helped them. It was some Microsoft stuff, nothing related to big data. But then there's like, oh, okay, we like your stuff. Can you help us? So I've been helping them with some development and some stuff. So I basically spent my time right now. So half of my time I do it like Pluralsight. Half of my time I do it with Cloudera. It's not 50-50. It's more like I do a project with Pluralsight, and then usually I'm able to do like another small project with them, and I kind of jump between the two. I have a few other things that I work on. I just published a book on Spark that you can find in Amazon. It's called Developing Spark Applications with Python. I do presentations from time to time. I do stuff around big data, computer vision, search. Search is kind of the thing that I spend the time, a little bit most on. But I'm expanding also into computer vision and other stuff around machine learning. So.
Oh, nice. What do you think are some of the big challenges facing search right now? I know for the longest time it was gathering and storing data that was the problem, and where are we going to put all this data? And now I feel like the problem has probably shifted a little bit. Like we have plenty of data, we know how to store it. Is retrieving it in the right way the biggest challenge?
So one of the main problems that search has is that nobody cares about search unless it's missing or it's being implemented in a bad way. So people, when you say search, everybody thinks about Google, and Google works quite nice, for web search. But enterprise search is a completely different animal because there's so many different things that you need to take into account, like who has access to the data. I mean, you don't want your search engine to go in, crawl all of your enterprise content, and then when X employee, searches something, he gets back like as a result, I don't know, like the private financial data for next year or something. So, that's one thing. And the other thing, which is I've run into this several times, it's a thing of mentality. Developers, especially those that have been working with databases for quite a while, they're like, oh, but we don't need search. I mean, we got full text search on our stuff. And it's like, yeah, but what about ranking, relevancy? What about, tokenization or filtering? There's so many things that go into search that people don't take into account. So, and they're always like, I got this. I know how to do this. They try to do it. And then, it didn't work. Like there was this project that I did like 4 years ago. I built the search API with these guys with Search Technologies with one of the big 4 auditing firms. So there's one of these big companies that has like 80,000 auditors at the time. Whenever they're auditing a company, they run a search. Basically, the component that does all the search and brings back the results, depending on which country they are, what type of auditing and all that, I'm the guy who wrote that. So, which basically, I have a good story on that one, so I'll come back to that one in a minute. Okay. So, yeah, once I was done, it took me like 5 months. For that, I was deployed on site, which they needed someone to be there all the time. So their first thing was like, why don't you come on a Monday and you come back on a Friday? It's Atlanta. It's 4-hour direct flight. I was like, okay, I did it like for 3 weeks. I was like, why don't you just bring me here for like a couple of months? So I did that. I went over there. I mean, they were like a very casual business casual company. Everything was very serious. I went there. I did all the work that I had to do. But at the end, doing the handover to the developers, it was really hard. I mean, I churned like 4 or 5 people before we found someone who could actually put up with it, because they didn't understand. They had the search engine and they had XML configuration files, and they saw the text, and then when they saw the text inside the search engine, it's like, but this looks very different. Yeah, lemmatization, stemming. There's so many things that go into this. Search is it doesn't work like in a database, so it was really hard. But once I was done, then I just basically came back to Costa Rica. I just basically locked the door and went, because I'm like that. I've been doing this my whole life. But when I came back, I was here at my place, and I live in the boring part of Costa Rica. That's, in the center, the big block of concrete. If I drive like 20 minutes, it's just like mountains, and it's beautiful. And I can even see a volcano. We get ash from time to time here because it's an active volcano. But we don't get snow, but we get ash. It looks the same. So, so there was one December, my kids were, they were because we have a different schedule here. They get free all of December and all of January. And I told them, hey, can I work remote? And they said, you already work remote. And I said, can I work remote? And they're like, yeah, it's okay. So what I did is I rented a house at the beach in one of the most beautiful beaches here in Costa Rica. It's called Santa Teresa. It's a little surf town. So I just went over there and I just put like a sticker on top of my webcam to make sure that it didn't turn on unexpectedly. I didn't have the little thing to close it at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So it turns out that everybody was business casual, but I was, back over there in Atlanta. And I was basically just wearing like just shorts. Don't tell anyone, please. I was basically just in shorts, brewing my coffee with like those real things that you just pour in this like a sock or whatever. There were like monkeys and there were iguanas. I was barefoot for a month, like with the beach right over there. Wow. It was beautiful. And they asked me, where are you? I'm like, I'm 100 miles from home, which for you, 100 miles is probably not that much. But for us, 100 miles is half the country. Because the country's like 200 miles from side to side. So I was like this beautiful surf town. I stayed there for the entire month of December and nobody ever even noticed. I mean, they didn't even know because I didn't turn on the camera, of course. They didn't even know where I was. They thought I was at home in the big boring block of concrete place. And they didn't even notice. So and I did this like 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, that's why I say that remote work is really good if you're used to it, if you know what you're doing, and if you have the right equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's one of the biggest tips you would give somebody who's just starting to work remotely?
So it's funny because I told this to my brother-in-law because when I explained to him that I was going to start working remotely, several years ago and doing this, he was like, dude, I would sleep until 10 a.m. every day. I was like, dude, no, okay. Even if you're working remotely, even if you're on your own time schedule, because when I build my courses for Pluralsight, I basically just sign an SOW. I deliver, my scope of work and I have a plan. And then I have to deliver in the future in a few weeks or a month or whatever. So you have to set your own schedule. So I try to use my schedule as if I was in an office. I get up, I shower. If I can be at the office really early, I am. If I have to help with the kids, I help with the kids. And then I go to the office. But I try to be predictable. Try to have my day be the same every single day. I wake up, I go to work. I have like a more or less set time to go to lunch. And then a time that I leave. Sometimes I have to work a lot in the evening because I have like this time crunches to deliver. Which, it may take a toll on the family. But what I do is I stop working at 5 p.m. I am with them, I just have dinner and stay together, for a while. And then like at 8 p.m. I sit down and I work till midnight. But I have a set schedule and I dedicate time to the family because if you don't dedicate time to the family, that's not going to end well. One thing that someone told me once is that no professional success can make up for a personal failure. So that's something that you need to take into account.
Yeah, that's a very good saying. And yeah, that does make a lot of sense. That's one of the things that I had to do. I worked remotely years ago, so this isn't my first time, but that was one of the first things is get up, take a shower, get dressed, dress as if you're going to work in an office. And then instead of walking out to your car or getting on the subway, you turn on your computer and sit down. And I find it's a little hard to shut it off sometimes at night. But now with my family here, they remind me that it's 5 o'clock. But before that, if nobody's home, I'm just still at it, still going, just wait till everyone gets home and whenever that is. So
yeah, on the dressing part, most of the day I dress like with a shirt like this and jeans. Although most of my wardrobe is the free T-shirts that I get at conferences. I have like a stack like with 50 of those. But one day, one of my daughters asked me, so why don't you dress like, and she pointed at someone who we know who was like all dressed up, like in a suit and everything. And I was like, honey, Daddy worked so hard to be independent so that he can wear shorts and sandals if he wants to.
Yes, exactly.
She thought that was pretty cool. She was like, oh, that's cool. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. But I do think there's a line, there's a kind of like right now, I'm wearing a hoodie and a conference shirt.
Yeah, I saw that. That's the first thing I noticed.
But I do think there's a line where you wouldn't want to be in like a tank top and shorts because then you're not going to feel like you're working, even if nobody sees you. It's going to feel like, for me anyway, it feels like that's too much relaxed time. So there's got to be pants and shoes and things like that. But
where do you live? That's the thing.
That's just me. I live in the Pacific Northwest, up near Portland. So.
Okay, yeah, I was Seattle there. If I rotated the camera and I showed you the sun around here, you would understand the shorts, because it's year round. I mean, one thing is, every conference that I go, every major conference at least, especially if you're a speaker or something, you get like a sweater. I have like 25 sweaters. I do not wear a sweater year round because there's never a need for one. I mean, it's never that hot or it's never that cold where I live. So yeah, I understand where you're going. I also do the jeans, but from time to time when it's hot like this, shorts really make a difference.
I've never been to Costa Rica, but I've been to Florida. I couldn't imagine wearing pants and long sleeve shirts in Florida.
Florida is a lot more humid. That's the difference. Here we got the sun, but it's not as humid as Florida. When I go to Florida, I feel like I'm just like, melting. So
yeah. So how did you like the Pacific Northwest? We're pretty similar to Washington. It's a short drive.
I love it, except like in July or something when it gets, or August, it's so hot. I once rented a place near Lake Sammamish. That's like just below the Microsoft Corp. And it was so hot that sometimes I had to just get out of the house, walk in, because the AC was broken for a few days. Walk into the lake, just walk out until they fix the AC. Yeah, it was quite a challenge, but I love it. I mean, that side of the country is so nice. People are like relaxed. I mean, you go out, it's so fun. I mean, I really loved it. So, yeah.
So, what are the big trends in big data and search right now? Where are things going? Where are people talking about?
So here's the thing about big data. Big data and search, at the end of the day, they are pretty much the same thing, but people for years, they saw them as if they were two different things. It's just like computer vision and machine learning. At the beginning, and I'm saying this because I just did an executive briefing on computer vision for Pluralsight, which will be published, I think it's tomorrow, early April, it's going to be published. So the thing about big data and search is that they are the same. So a lot of people didn't treat them as that for many years, but now that they realize, they see the potential. And something else is that for big data, most of the companies that do it, that's what's called big data, they are big companies. And some of those, they had a lot of data centers. But, since a few years back, they're starting to realize the potential of the cloud, the ability of being able to create applications that can scale up and down. It has cost savings, and they're not limited because, for example, for that search application that we did for this big company, I mean, they had like 120 servers just for the search application. It was a ton of servers, but if you needed more, it was not that easy to get a few more. But, with the cloud, you can just provision a couple of instances, process a big chunk of data, shut it down, and, there you are. So that's basically one of the things where companies are now starting to leverage.
Yeah, and that would make sense. I know that it's been a long time since I worked on anything related to search, but it was definitely like hard machines in the data center with very fixed limits. And so it's like, well, we can do this, but that's going to slow everybody else down. And so I could see that being the main differentiator now, is it's, sliding a bar or spinning up a couple of more instances or whatever.
One analogy that I always use is, when it comes to the cloud, if you had your own corporate data center, that would be like buying a car. Imagine if you had to go out today and you needed a car, you didn't have one. You wouldn't buy a car just to go out for one day and come back. But if you were like renting a car, or, that's like the equivalent of the cloud. You're just going to use it for one day and just pay a very small amount of money. In that search application, I remember that one day I was in an email thread that I was not supposed to be. And we were waiting for the machines, and I just opened the thread. I was like, 1.2 million pounds, not even dollars, pounds. That's how much it just started to get the machines to get ready, as opposed to the cloud. It's probably going to be a few $1,000s to get started. And, and it's also something that you can deduct right away. I mean, it's not a capital expense. It's an operating expense.
Yeah. And do you think that's going to enable smaller startups and smaller companies to access some of the more powerful search things that the big companies have had for years?
Actually, and I say that in one of my courses on Cloudera that I have in Pluralsight, the barrier to entry because of the high cost of buying servers is one of the things that prevents startups from building this nice things, from innovating. But now they can just build a very small application, test it with, a few gigabytes of data. It'll just cost you a couple $100. Now you can have a full working MVP and minimum viable product and go show it to someone and, get the funds necessary to scale it up, or start small and start bootstrapping. And then you get to a point where you have an application that has been paying for itself and that you can commercialize and you can make money. So, you hit it right on the nail over there.
Very cool. So how did you get involved with computer vision? Was that just something that you were curious about and decided to get into?
So it all started because I built a software as a service application a couple of years ago that was around cars. And the support center that I have right now it's an application that's used by dealerships. And one of the things is that for the selling cars, it uses a solar in the back end. It uses search. I was like, okay, this is cool. I can do search for cars, using a back end. But what if I just use the pictures? And that's what I started to try, and that project has evolved. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So basically using computer vision instead of hitting the database. And so if someone's saying, I want to search for a red Mustang, then you can start hitting the images.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's half the story. The other half is that I like to take pictures a lot of my kids. I have like 140,000 pictures right now since they were born in 8 years. So I have it in a Dropbox. It's a huge amount of pictures. And my wife always spends a lot of time, going through the pictures and curating the collection and making sure that he has the perfect pictures. And I've always told you, I am going to arrange all these pictures and classify them either when I retire or before. And one day I was like, oh, I'm just going to use computer vision for that. So that's something else that I'm working on right now, computer vision to classify my own personal stuff. There's a couple of other projects that are there that I've been in discussion with some people, but I haven't been there. One of them is also, that's why I have an Oculus Quest. There's one application that I'm working with some friends that we have for selling cars. It's something similar. Everything's about cars. I love cars. So
same here. I'm with you.
Yeah. I love Land Rovers. I have 2 old Land Rovers and I have a Mustang, and my daily driver is a pickup truck with all the toys that you can put on top of it. So I really love those things. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically because I had something about cars, and then computer vision came in, and then the kids. So it all came through together, stitched together. So
yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. Did you ever have a job before you were in tech that you think helped you in tech? Like, this is one of the things that I've been asking podcast guests, because, like, for instance, I worked in a lumber mill before I went into college and stacked wood all day, right? Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't think that there's anything there that could transfer to tech. However, I learned a lot about production and flow. So years and years later, when I got into DevOps, the idea of flow and optimizing production was kind of stuck in my head, remembering how they push these logs in and turn them into boards, and then we stack the boards and push them out, and if one point goes faster than the other, everything gets messed up. So is there any job that you could think of that you had before tech that may have helped you inadvertently in what you do now?
So I've been a little bit boring in terms of jobs that are not tech. When I was like in high school, my grandfather used to hire me during Christmas just to work for him for a little bit in his office. So I just had to do errands, and I started doing, giving around papers, and all of a sudden I started helping organize the papers, and I was more organized than some of the other people. That was in high school. When I got out of high school, in my last year, I wanted to be a mechanic. So I basically, my parents knew the owners of Land Rover in Costa Rica. So they asked him, hey, can he work as a mechanic? Just like a grease monkey or whatever. So they said, yeah, just have him come in. So I went there. I worked there for a month. These hands are not built for cars, I guess. The heavy machinery. I'm probably a mouse and a keyboard guy. So I worked there for a month. I was like, yeah, I love cars, but probably I would like to buy the cars, not fix the cars. So after that, I just went to college. I studied, 4-year program, and I got out of it, and I started working. When I was graduating, I did a gig for like 2 months. That was like my graduating project at an accounting firm. So the accounting, the part of you take this and you add it up with this, and it has to add up with this, that didn't call my attention that much. Although it was good work, I learned a lot. It was Microsoft, pure Microsoft. But then I got hired by this company called Artensoft. It's artificial intelligence software. And this is a company from the 1990s. So even the name, you can tell, what it was. It was partially owned by Microsoft, partially owned by Intel Capital, and partially owned by some Costa Ricans. But that's when I got my start with Microsoft, because what they were doing is they built the migrator from VB6 to VB.NET, and which was included in the Visual Studio 1.0 release. So yeah, that's how far this goes. Visual Studio.NET. So, yeah, I was working with the .NET code, it was all NDA, but even before it was published, and we were working on the migrator, and it turned out that I'm good at talking in front of a crowd. I don't know how we figured this out. I just started asking some questions, and then one day somebody else told me, hey, do you want to do a presentation on how to use a migrator? And I did it, and I did one presentation, and they liked it. It was, an internal presentation, and then they sent me to Puerto Rico to do a presentation in front of 20 people. I did that one, and they liked it, and they sent me to Mexico to do another one to, it was another 20 people, and they liked it, and they sent me the next week to another one, 50 people, and I was like, okay, this is good, 50 people. My fourth presentation, and this is not a joke, they sent me to Mexico DF. They tell me, just go there. And when I got there, 850 people, my fourth public presentation.
Oh, wow.
So I got a little bit of a rough start, but it went well. I was able to push through that. Then they liked it, and that's when they sent me to Seattle to do some presentations. And it turned out that I built the app, the material that Microsoft was using to teach people how to move from 32-bit to 64-bit computing. And I then delivered this all over the world in all the MTCs, those are the Microsoft Technology Centers. So I had to go to India a couple of times, to Korea, Europe. I had to go 7 times to London, Netherlands, Sweden, you name it, we went over there.
Wow.
And over the US, all the cities from side to side. So I spent basically 3 years traveling, probably 8 months out of the year. So I was living off a suitcase, didn't have a girlfriend because nobody would talk to me for a little bit because I was just on the road all the time. It was fun. I put 50 pounds. That was a downside because it was fun times. I mean, we used to get to a lab, and we were traveling with 3 containers with Itaniums. That was the 64-bit computing technology at the time. Later on were the AMD 64s. So we got there, and we had 50 physical machines. There were no virtual machines at the time or anything. So we had to take this 50 big machines, put them, we had some help, but we still had to help. And then take out 50 CDs and put them in and use an image like Norton image or something to just reload the image and just put the machines in their state. And that was Sunday. Then we did Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It was from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day with customers. And then on Thursday, it was tear down. And then Friday, we traveled someplace and we had Saturdays free. And we did this for 3 years. So it was pretty intense, to say the least. But, made it 1 million miles or something. And got to travel to a lot of places, eat a lot of food, meet a lot of people. So it was a very good experience.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
Actually. So that's pretty cool.
Especially if you're in your late 20s, because at the time, and I was getting, paid everything at home and paid for the travel. So I was just basically traveling the world, teaching people how to do 64-bit computing. So
nice. So do you still keep abreast of changes in .NET? Because you mentioned that you had a background in .NET. And I know I've taken one of your courses, and I don't remember the title of it now. It had something
to do you were the one. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, most of your courses are about data and things like that, but I knew you had a .NET one. I had to look it up.
Jason.NET is probably the one.
Yeah. And so are you still kind of keeping abreast of things in .NET and how it's going, or have you found that you've kind of drifted away from it?
So I've taken a lot of Python now, because Python, that's what you use mostly for big data. But yeah, .NET is one of my still go-to language. Oh, C# is one of my go-to languages. I still have some internal applications that I use for my support center, which are built in .NET and that I personally supervise and manage. And I still do a bunch of stuff. I also help on SolarNet, which is the C# API for solar, which is in GitHub. It's open source. So I still help over there from time to time. Although there's a guy called Gidon who basically is the guy who does everything over there. He's wonderful. But yeah, .NET and C# especially and Python, those are my two go-to languages for everything.
Yeah, that's hard to get away from. In my career, I started in Linux and open source things, and then kind of got dragged into the .NET world when .NET wasn't so awesome, like kind of late 2008, 2009. And so I've always kind of kept in that and kind of watching, and it's just amazing where they're at now. It's
I love it.
And the things they're moving towards with .NET Core and things like that. It's pretty cool stuff. So what does your learning path look like? So if you want to learn something new, say something new comes out, or even if it's like a new feature in solar or something like that, how do you go about learning it? And
so first of all, depends. If there's something that there's a course already, like a Pluralsight, I can take that, but I'm usually not the guy who takes them from beginning to end. I know that maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm just kidding. But I always try to go to like the pieces that are of interest to me, and I try to apply it to a real world problem, like what I told you on computer vision. And there's this nice thing that I want to learn about. So, and I just start and and I open an environment and I watch a little bit. I see how it's done, and then I try and go and do it on my own. And by doing this, you get to practice because it's very important to know what you need to know. But to become a master, you need to practice. It's all practice, practice, practice.
Nice. So yeah, that's a pretty big element. How does somebody practice like Apache Solar, for instance? How would you practice working with that?
Yeah, Solar is so easy to practice. Actually, I wrote a blog post for the MSDN magazine last year where I explained how to get started with C#. It's very simple. You can go and read that post if you want to, but also what you can do is you can just download Solar. It runs, in a Linux, in a Mac, or in a Windows. You unzip it and you just execute a command and you get Solar running. It takes like 5 minutes, including the download depending on your computer, on your speed. And once you're there, you can start indexing data, which you can do using XML, using JSON. There are some commands, or you can upload files, or you can build an application like using SolarNet with C#.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I'm actually not very familiar with Solar, but I kind of pictured it as being something that would take a lot of horsepower to run and a lot of big machines, but that's something that you could run locally and start developing with?
In any machine, just regular, it's very lightweight. You have to have Java though, but probably you already have it installed.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Let's see. How about one last question for you?
Yeah, go.
If you were going to name a programming language, what would you name it and why?
Oh. I have no idea. I've never thought about that.
I hadn't either until my boss asked me that at one point. And I thought it was for something company related. So I'm like trying to think of good professional names, but
yeah, no, I'll probably, if I had to do it, I'll probably call it like Luciana, because my daughters are called Lucia and Juliana, so just like merging the names. We already have like Julia. I mean, there's some stuff like that. I'll call it Luciana, and it's like, yeah. Because, a good story is that Hadoop, the ecosystem, was named after the son of, after a toy that the son of the creator had. It was a little elephant. And his name is Doug Cutting. I've met him several times. He works with Cloudera. We were actually having some beers like 3 or 4 weeks ago at an event that I went with them. He's a really cool guy. So he invented the whole big data thing with Hadoop. And he basically, his son had a toy elephant called Hadoop. And that's why it's called Hadoop. So
really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good way to name stuff. So is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we didn't talk about, or anything that I didn't ask?
So basically, for those of you who are looking at remote work for the first time, just hang in there. Just like everything, it takes a little bit of time. you'll get used to it. Try to be as repetitive as possible. And by repetitive, I mean like a very constant, predictable. Try to make it feel like you're in an office, even if you're at home. Keep a schedule for the kids. That's a good one. And just hang there. It gets a lot easier. So
awesome.
Pretty much.
And do you have any advice for anyone who would want to get into machine learning or search?
So watch our courses. That's pretty much it. Yeah, the solar one is one that I really like because, in a couple of hours, I basically tell you how to get started, how to install solar, what are the basic. I'm going to be updating it pretty soon. I know it's a little bit out of date, but it's like next on my list. And once you do that, if you're a C# developer, I have a second course which is called Building Search Applications using .NET, which assumes that you already know a little bit of solar. And it tells you every single step that you need to take to build a search application from beginning to end. It's basically I teach you like in 3 hours what takes a regular person without this kind of training months to learn. So
nice.
That would be my suggestion.
Nice. I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to check out your article and install solar because I've always been pretty curious about it. Okay. And most of the time when I build applications these days, it's kind of one-off for me or for a few people. And I just do like, select star, get creative with things. I didn't know anything about search. So
once you see a search engine, you're like, oh, wow. Why didn't I know about this before?
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Thank you very much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to All Hands on Tech. If you like it, please rate us. You can see episode transcripts and more at pluralsight.com/podcast.